Hey, what's up guys? This is Anthony from AnthonysCustoms, and for this review we are finally looking at the new Jim Lee Cyclops Marvel Legends figure. If you guys know me, you know that the Jim Lee Cyclops, especially from the 90s cartoon, is one of my favorite Marvel characters. I've always liked it. I don't know why. Cyclops isn't in general my favorite character, but something about this look, it just works for me. So not having a good figure for this guy for a long time was kind of irritating, and now we finally have one. Now the question is this new one good? As you can see, it's pretty easy to tell. It's at least not bad, and in fact there are some pretty good things about it, so let's go ahead and get it off the stand and take a closer look. This guy stands just about 16.5 centimeters tall, which makes him just about 6.5 inches. It's actually just a tiny bit over. Now, before I get into anything else, I want to comment on something that I'm not quite sure about. Here's the thing. It looks to me like the upper body is all the Bucky Cap mold. We've seen that before for both Cyclops and about 100 other characters, and that's okay. We'll get into the proportions in a minute. But the lower body, the legs in particular, look to me like they are not quite the same as the original Bucky Cap mold. Now, I don't actually have any Bucky Cap molds on hand to compare it to because all my stuff is in Texas, but looking at the anatomy and then looking at the little tab marks from the molding and things, it looks to me like these are slightly different legs than before, which make them a little bit slimmer. And I could be totally crazy. That's definitely an option, but it looks to me like they are different. And what really made me think that was looking at the ankles. It could just be the yellow, I don't know, but they look slimmer. They look like they're not quite as fat and chunky, and it gives him much better proportions. It could all be an optical illusion, or I could be crazy. That's definitely a possibility, but I have a hunch that it's a slightly different sculpt. I don't have one on hand to compare it to, though, so I can't say for sure, so we're just going to move on from there. Now, if you remember the Jim Lee Cyclops, and basically any other Jim Lee character, they were definitely drawn to look like bodybuilders. They were all very bulky, especially Cyclops. With that in mind, I do think that the Spider UK body would have been a much better mold for Cyclops. I really wish they had used that rather than the Bucky Cap mold. He's just not supposed to be that slender in this version. But that being said, it doesn't look bad. It is definitely acceptable. I mean, we probably should have expected that they're going to reuse the Bucky Cap mold more and more, even though that Spider UK mold fits most characters better. So it's something I can live with. It's not the worst thing in the world. It's still a nice mold, but definitely not necessarily appropriate for the Jim Lee Cyclops. So the other question is, what about the bands on his arms? How did they handle that? Well, they're all separate pieces that are not connected in any way, arms or legs. For the wrist, they work pretty well. They fit, obviously, and they don't have anywhere to go, so that's fine. You can even rotate them around with the hand if you want to, and they're just going to sit there, so that's fine. They don't have any paint on them, though. Would have been nice to have a little bit of something, and we'll talk about that more in a second. As for the legs, it's the same situation, except they didn't glue them on or anything. So the ones on the thighs you can kind of wedge in place, and they don't fall that easily. They'll stay in place for the most part. But the ones for the calves, they just love to fall off. It's a total pain in the butt. Every time you pose this guy, these things want to move. So what I would recommend, and do this at your own risk and with caution, I would glue them in place. Hasbro should have, to be quite honest. But if I was you, I would glue them. And I would probably do it underneath the seam here. You don't need them any higher, and they fit really nicely right there. So I would do that. Then you'll still have your shin swivel, and they won't fall off every time you pose the figure. So that's just my 2 cents on that. But they are sculpted well, which is, like, it's kind of annoying because they did a good job sculpting them. They could have just glued them on, and we'd have been good. But I have a feeling they didn't do that because they probably would have glued them on crooked, and then we would have all been screwed. So that's okay, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. It's like it's kind of a good thing that they didn't make it worse, I guess we could say. But having these things fall off is really annoying. Let's talk about this belt now. They're generally drawn so that all the straps on the wrists and wrists and feet and thighs all match this belt and harness area. So, do they match? No, not at all. They put this really weird, like, peach orangish colored wash on the harness, and it's everywhere. And so it's a totally different color, which really does distract from the figure. If it had just a tiny bit of wash on there and then even put that on the other straps and things, it would have looked fantastic. But as it is, this is almost like a macaroni color as opposed to everything else being yellow. So it is very distracting. The X's are painted nicely, and they did put some gold on there, even though it's very not great. It's there, so I guess that's bonus points, but Having the orange on the straps only just looks very weird. Another interesting thing about the straps, which I have to comment on because, like I said, I'm a big fan of Cyclops, and there are some key characteristics of the Jim Lee Cyclops. He wore his belt really high. In fact, one of the problems with the ToyBiz one was that the belt was so low, almost where this one is that he only had his downward piece for his crotch. He had no hip area at all. This almost has that same effect. And this belt it's a floating piece, so all they had to do was make this a little bit shorter, and if they push the belt up to, why won't it move now? If they push the belt up to right here, that's actually accurate. If the belt was above the waist twist, it's much more accurate for the Jim Lee Cyclops, and it would have even cost them less money. And it would have looked so much better, so much more accurate. I know normal people don't like their belt being that high, but that is how he was drawn, so it would have been nice. Okay, then the last thing about the belt that we have to talk about is that it doesn't really fit him properly. This part fits okay, but the way it comes down and connects to this belt, it's always crooked. It is always crooked. The X is almost impossible to get squared up unless you rotate the body, which you don't want to have to do. And it unsnaps itself very easily because it doesn't fit that well, and it's a fairly rigid plastic. So as soon as you pose him, you see how it forces it like that? It will try to unsnap them. So you could glue it. I don't know if that's a great idea, but you can. And so it does have the articulation. We'll talk about articulation in a minute. But as you use it, it's just not great. And they could have avoided that again by putting the belt up higher where it should have gone. Ultimately, it still looks really good, but there is one thing about this figure that looks even better, and that is the head sculpt. The head sculpt on this thing is fantastic. I absolutely love it. It looks really nice. The hair looks so much better than those old versions. I love it. I love the head, so that's great. I'm thinking I might make a like an angry head where he's yelling or something, and have some casts available for that. If you guys are interested in something like that, I might be selling those. I have Wolverine and Deadpool in the works right now, but I'm trying to get, I think I'm going to do him. Anyway, it's a really nice head sculpt. I like the gold paint on there, and the hair has this really nice black wash in there, so that looks very nice. Happy about that. Let's do articulation. We'll talk about the other things as we do that. So the head on the standard hinge with the swivel. Well, it's technically a ball peg, so you can lean it a little bit, but also the head sits nicely on the neck. I am very pleased with how that looks, so that's a good thing. We have our standard ball hinge, which goes out almost horizontally, so that's good. Full rotation, bicep swivel, double jointed elbow, which is fine. We have our wrist swivel and hinge with his optic blast fingers right there, so that's good. We have our ab crunch, which only goes back a little bit, and it goes forward all the way, but definitely is going to mess with the harness. Okay, so we do have our waist twist, which is also going to screw with the harness because it's too low, but you can deal with that, I think. For the hips, you can bring the legs almost all the way forward, so that's pretty good. Going out to the side, and that's pretty good. It's definitely good enough, so I'll take it. We have our thigh swivels, which is good. Double jointed knees work out pretty well. We have our shin swivel down here, which is fine on this leg. This one, it's totally frozen. We have the ankle hinge that goes pretty far forward, pretty far back, which is basically all the way. And then we have the ankle rocker, which it comes out fairly square. It's not the best, but if you need to, you can rotate the shin swivel and hide it. Stretch one of those guys out and hide it a little bit, and then you have a really nice ankle rocker. So that's up to you. But you have to be careful. These guys will just fall off like crazy. And this is a pain in the ass, but otherwise I have to say I am pleased. It definitely could be better, but I am very pleased with this. And Cyclops, I'm kind of biased because I really like the Jim Lee Cyclops, and they didn't do a bad job. It may not be the best, but it's definitely good enough. And the head sculpt is great. So there it is, guys. Let me know, by the way. Don't forget to let me know if you would be interested in possibly purchasing, if I do it, a cast, maybe painted, maybe unpainted, depending, of the angry face, just out of curiosity. But yeah, so that's it. I do recommend it. If you want to track these guys down, as of right now, they're only at Target, but Big Bad Toy Store should have them available in the near future. Follow me on Facebook if you want to be updated on that. Thanks for watching, guys. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. I have new videos up every single day. We talk about action figures, movies, TV shows, video games, and all kinds of fun stuff. So make sure you turn on notifications so you don't miss any of it. Make sure you give the video a thumbs up if you liked it. And in the meantime, keep collecting.